Democratic presidential nominee, meanwhile, Hillary Clinton trying to change the focus from her email scandal to her opponent, Donald Trump. But new emails obtained by Citizens United suggest more scandal, that a senior Clinton aide stage-managed the first Benghazi hearing by feeding Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Senator Robert Menendez the questions that Hillary wanted to address. One email reads this, quote, "We wired it that Menendez would provide an opportunity to address two topics we needed to debunk: her actions and whereabouts on 9/11, and these email from Chris Stevens about moving locations." Joining us right now is Katrina Pierson. She is national spokesperson for the Donald Trump campaign. Katrina, thanks very much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you.
So this is another example, Katrina, of Hillary Clinton working to rewrite the facts of the Benghazi attack. Will voters care?
I think they will absolutely care, and I think we've seen that movement in the polls just here recently. This is a problem, and this is why they're now looking at obstruction of justice. This was obviously a failure to secure state secrets, and we have a serious problem now because Benghazi emails were found in this big stack of emails that were released, and they're still going through them today.
As much as her negatives continue to rise, his negatives are as well, and people want to see specifics from Donald Trump. We just heard from the head of the NAACP. He wants specifics on the black community. But tonight you've got a big forum, a foreign policy forum. What specifics will Donald Trump offer in terms of the war on terror?
Well, first, their negatives are high, but for very different reasons. For Hillary Clinton, it's honesty and trustworthiness. And for Donald Trump, it's just a personality flaw that most people can't get on board with. But I think at the end of the day, the policies are going to move out. The NAACP is an institution that is kept in place by division among the races, and Mr. Trump's policies are for all communities, whether you're black, white, Hispanic, or Asian. His economic policies specifically, which is what he's leading on. Mr. Trump has been offering specifics. He's offered 10-point plans on a number of different things. You can go to donaldjtrump.com and find those specifics, because Mr. Trump is running an American campaign.
Katrina?
He's not running a coordinated boxed campaign.
Sure. Can I just ask you, Donald Trump was invited on this show to come and address the NAACP. The president said that Mr. Trump has turned them down time and time again. Are you saying now that Donald Trump would dodge the invitation to go and address the NAACP? Does he have the guts to show up and address that organization?
I don't think guts are a question for Mr. Trump, but the president left out a small detail in that invitation. It was during the GOP convention. That is why Mr. Trump could not make that meeting.
Right now
I think that's a conflict of interest.
He's invited him right now on the show today. He did just invite him, and there are about 60 days left in this election cycle. Mr. Trump is going to continue to meet with organizations and groups. And what the individual also failed to mention is the fact that Mr. Trump has been meeting with individuals in the black community since the primary. So that's a no?
He met with the Black Chamber of Commerce. He met with several pastors, black pastors, hundreds of them, in fact. So Mr. Trump hasn't even tried to go to Chicago just this past March. So Mr. Trump has been making an effort the entire time.
Yeah, and I guess the polls have tightened in the last couple of weeks, so he's doing something right, Dagan.
Katrina, they have actually tightened. So you had a lead in the latest CNN, the national polls in the last week in Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio show a race that's tightening. Florida within the margin of error, North Carolina, and even potentially Arizona still within reach of the Trump campaign. How much more time can he spend on the ground in those states and avoid states that are not wins for him, that are just out of the question, like Washington, for example?
How about New York?
Right.
Well, I think what you've seen with Mr. Trump is he's extremely hard worker. He has been out there all day, every day, going from state to state, holding multiple events per day, unlike Hillary Clinton, who took a month off. And he's just committed, and this is something that Mr. Trump has been speaking about from the very beginning. He has the strength and stamina to get the job done. He's going to get out there, and he's going to compete for every single vote that's available. And the polls are tightening because Americans see that, and they can see the sincerity and the genuine of his policies, because Mr. Trump cares about this country, and the polls are tightening even among African Americans. We're at 8% now, which is more than John McCain and Mitt Romney combined. Wow. Mr. Trump is working hard.
Katrina, one of the biggest stats that surprised me from last month was that Hillary Clinton has a staff of over 700 people and Donald Trump has only 80. He's not opened his offices yet. yet in the battleground states where he's got minimal presence there. When is he going to do that? Now that the polls have tightened, is he going to start actually putting boots on the ground and taking this seriously, where he needs to go in there and actually go on the ground in the swing states?
Well, these are actually the same reports we had during the primary. If you'll recall, Mr. Trump doesn't have offices, he doesn't have a staff, he doesn't have ground game, and then he broke the record in primary turnout. There are now, between the Trump campaign and the RNC, 1,000 offices that are open, and they are fully functioning. Mr. Trump has thousands of volunteers in these states.
But
that's why he's doing so well. Even though Hillary Clinton has hundreds of staff members, even though Hillary Clinton has hundreds of staffers and has spent hundreds of millions of dollars in ads, Mr. Trump just pulled ahead this week.
Yeah. Yeah. Katrina, the Dallas Morning News is releasing an editorial this morning endorsing Hillary Clinton for president. It's the first time your hometown paper has recommended a Democrat since before World War II. That's more than 70 years and nearly 20 elections. What do you do about it?
Well, nothing. We just acknowledge that the Dallas Morning News is a liberal paper. The reason why they have supported Republicans is because that's the establishment in the state of Texas. And this is just an effort to continue to try to turn Texas blue, and it's just not going to work.
Let me ask you this, Katrina, because when Donald Trump joined us, I guess about almost a month ago now, he said that after Labor Day, he told me this, after Labor Day, he would be releasing some of the names of the people that he would consider putting in his cabinet so that America can understand who he's going to surround himself with should he become president. Is that still in the plans? Is he going to be telling us a name or two in terms of who he's expecting to be naming in terms of his cabinet before the election?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. Mr. Trump is committed to doing that because it is important for people to see what his administration would look like, so people would have a better idea of the policies and governance that would be coming forward. But when we're looking at today with the status quo and the thought of continuing that, the country cannot sustain the interest rates being this low, and the country cannot sustain moving forward with more spending, more government programs, and less jobs. This is just not going to work for America. Mr. Trump is going to put forth a pro-growth, pro-secure agenda for America, and he's going to show you who's going to help him lead that process.
Real quick, tonight's the Commander-in-Chief Forum. What's the most important policy change we'll hear, or policy that we're going to hear from Donald Trump tonight at this important forum?
Well, they're all important. Again, we cannot continue to sustain this policy of regime change and creating vacuums for terrorism. We cannot continue this policy of funding Iran. They don't even have to make a bomb anymore. They can just buy one now, thanks to American taxpayers in this administration. And we just cannot continue to sustain that type of policy in the Middle East. All
right, we will leave it there. Katrina, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
Joining us right now is NAACP President and CEO Cornell William Brooks. Good to see you, sir. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good to see you.
Your reaction to Trump's response last night and his showing overall right now in the black community?
Mr. Trump's response last night is a demonstration of the degree to which he does not appreciate the intelligence, the policy awareness, and the love of African Americans for this country and our concern about its future. And so the point being here is one visit to an African American church 60 days before the election does not a campaign make. Dancing at an African American church, having a good time at an African American church does not speak to his positions with respect to policing or voting rights or the economy relative to African Americans or Americans more broadly. As Mr. O'Reilly has lifted up, his calling into question President Barack Obama's parentage, his citizenship, is insulting. And the fact that he has not taken responsibility for that or apologized speaks to the fact that he does not understand the people to whom he is speaking.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you feel that President Obama should apologize to the African American community for failing to live up to the promise that he made at the start of his term?
Well, the president should not apologize to anyone with respect to his policies. The president worked in the first term with a Congress, passed health care, rescued the economy from the abyss. In the second term, he certainly did not have a Congress that was willing to work with him.
Right.
So the president doesn't owe anyone an apology.
Let me just, you know what, the reason I bring this up is because, you know, rap mogul P. Diddy said just last week President Obama has, quote, shortchanged the black community. He says he wants Hillary Clinton to earn his community's support. How do either of these candidates earn the community's support?
Well, they earn the community's support by offering up policies, plans, prescriptions for reform that make sense. Where you have one candidate who has serially declined to speak to African Americans until 60 days before the election. You have another candidate who came before the NAACP, who went before the National Association of Black Journalists, who spoke in depth and in detail with respect to the nation's civil rights agenda and issues of concern to the African American community. There's a stark contrast. We are 60 days out from the election. If someone can share with me or any members of the NAACP or the nation at large, where does Mr. Trump stand with respect to voting rights? Where does he stand with respect to community policing? Where does he stand with respect to African American unemployment, which he has cited inaccurately, but he has not offered any prescriptions as to the resolution of that?
Do you think that it's patronizing for Donald Trump to say to the African American community, I will fix this, I will make it better, without offering an actual solution, something that he does on other policy issues too? I'm going to make it all better. Isn't the obvious question how? And the same thing for Hillary Clinton?
Oh, it is absolutely, it's personally patronizing and politically condescending to both refuse to offer up specifics and to simply be late to the party in terms of campaigning among African Americans, and then to assume that visiting one church with one pastor would suffice in terms of actually addressing the nation's civil rights issues and issues of concern to the African American community. It's certainly condescending. I mean, if you listen to the language...
Was Hillary Clinton saying that she carries around hot sauce condescending? Was that patronizing? Remember, she said, oh, actually, you know, I carry around hot sauce. I think she was sort of playing up to the group that she was with at the time.
I think she was playing off Beyonce's lyrics in terms of lemonade and hot sauce and carrying it in a bag. I mean, that's certainly a hip-hop reference, a joke. But
Cornell,
more to the
you don't think it was patronizing,
yes.
then? You don't think it was patronizing?
In the context of all that she said, no.
Wait, but Cornell, I've got to bring up, when she was running for the nomination in 2008, both overtly and covertly, the Clintons said some things that were repugnant and racist, quite frankly, in talking about our president, our current president. Does that stick with you?
Certainly, there are people within the African American community, among Democrats, among Republicans, who were taken aback by comments in the previous campaign and held them accountable. So there's no lack of a critique for the Clintons with respect to the things that they've said. Certainly the comments about by Secretary Clinton in terms of super predators. But note the difference here. Secretary Clinton has taken responsibility for things that she has said. Mr. Trump, on the other hand, has not.
How did she do that? How did she take responsibility?
She talked about the term super predator. She talked about her crime policies. She came before the NAACP and talked in depth and in detail as to what she would do. Note, Mr. Trump, on the other hand,
quick question on that, because you talked about what she would do on her crime policies. I mean, she lobbied Congress in 1994 on that crime bill, which actually oppressed minorities as well as the poor when Bill Clinton was president. And so I was wondering what her take was on that and how she addressed that issue with you. And while I got I want to congratulate you on beating the city of Philadelphia right now in the free speech thing where you can actually run your ad.
Well, I will simply note this. Secretary Clinton stood flat-footed before the NAACP and spoke about sentencing. She spoke about criminal justice reform. She spoke about policing and community policing for at least 40 minutes. Have
you invited Donald Trump to speak in front of the group? Have you invited? Do you want to invite Donald Trump to the NAACP right now on this program? What do you want to say to Donald Trump right now?
We would simply say to Donald Trump what we have said all along, which is to say that the NAACP is a nonpartisan civil rights organization.
Are you inviting him to speak to your group?
Absolutely. We've extended serial invitations to Mr. Trump before he won the nomination and subsequent. And so the point being here, the fact that he has serially declined to speak before the NAACP and other civil rights organizations speaks to the fact that he either does not have anything to say or does not know how to say it.
Yeah,
but in either case, people are listening.
I'm just saying, I mean, I know he has been doing this narrative about sort of a dire situation, but when you see things like the 500th murder committed over Labor Day in Chicago alone, year to date, you wonder what's going on. I mean, what's your take in terms of reversing that course?
If you're truly concerned about the number of young people who are losing their lives in places like Chicago, then the way to respond to that is not merely with grief, but with specific policy prescriptions. So in other words, what would you do in terms of weapons on the street? What would you do in terms of youth unemployment? What we've seen from Mr. Trump quite often has been a campaign of complaint. He's lifted up statistically what's wrong with the African American community as he has so defined it. He, however, has not spoken specifically about what he would do with the problems that plague the African American community specifically and America more broadly.
Yeah.
That's a challenge here.
To be clear, he does have an economic plan, and he's talking about creating new jobs through his tax plan and through the rollback of regulation. I would say that is his plan.
I would simply say that he has become more specific in that regard as time has progressed. But note the calendar, 60 days out.
Right.
The point being here is if he's just becoming familiar with large segments of the American populace, this close to the election, this does not speak well.
We will leave it there. Mr. Brooks, good to see you, sir. Thanks so much.
It's good to see you.
We'll see you soon. Welcome back. Billionaire backlash. Mark Cuban stepping up his attack on Donald Trump with Neil Cavuto yesterday. He issued this warning for investors.
I have my Trump hedge on. In the event Donald wins, I have no doubt in my mind the market tanks. And so I literally have put on a more than 100% hedge that I'll put on stronger if it looks like there's a better chance as we go forward.
But what about other investors? Let's talk about that. Joining us right now is Jason Trennert. He is Strategis Chief Investment Strategist. Good to see you, Jason.
Good to see you.
Do you agree with that? Markets tank if Donald Trump gets in?
No. I mean, I think there may be an initial reaction in that regard because it's a fear of the unknown. By the same token, though, if the markets were to sell off, I would be a buyer. When I look at the policy mix that we have right now, we have very easy monetary policy, but we have tight fiscal policy, tight regulatory policy, and trade, I would say, is probably a push. We get Donald Trump, you're going to have easier fiscal and easier regulatory policy along with easier monetary policy. So that is going to be very good for the economy. Trade, I would say, is the big question mark. But I have to say both candidates right now are being pushed into being somewhat more hawkish on trade. So I'm not so sure there's a big difference. And frankly, anything that stimulates capital investment, capital formation, in my opinion, is exactly what the economy needs right now. And I don't think you're going to get that with essentially a third Obama term.
I think this is a great point because the fact is Donald Trump is talking about a 15% corporate tax rate. I mean, if you've got, and he's talking about companies bringing money back from overseas, you have to believe that's going to spur investment.
Listen, the U.S. tax code is 3.5 million words, okay? The New Testament and Old Testament together are about 800,000 words, okay? This, as a businessman myself, I can tell you anything that simplifies the tax code, that makes it easier to do business, is going to result in more investment. It's just, you know, the lower prices are, the more you get of something, and that's, I think, I feel very strongly that would be very helpful.
Well, and you look at Donald Trump's economic plan, which he laid out in Michigan was a very solid one. He talks about taxes, and he talks about bringing that down to around 15%, as well as when you look at overseas, we have Great Britain going to 17%, possibly 15%. We're just not competitive globally in the G20 on our corporate tax rate, which is a shame right now. So for him to talk about that, you're seeing the market really give in to the fact that whether Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton wins, it's going to be a stable market. There's not going to be huge sell-offs.
Well, Hillary wants to raise taxes, and she's raising taxes, digging on the highest earners. That's going to hit small business. So how does that grow the economy?
Right, and she also wants to raise capital gains taxes in a way. She wants to complicate the tax code, particularly with capital gains taxes. And midterm capital gains tax rates go back to the level they were during the Jimmy Carter administration. So that's never good for investment. But do you worry we've gone so long without a recession, we've got valuations that you kind of have to hold your nose depending on the company?
Well, I think that's fair. And I think there is also a certain element of truth in the idea that this is a somewhat manipulated economy. There's no two ways about it.
Because of the Fed.
Because of the Fed. You have the 0% interest rates.
And so, other central banks around the globe, too, right? I mean, we've got $12.7 trillion on balance sheets of the G7 economies.
Well, it's, listen, I think you're providing all the wrong incentives for companies, really, right? If you can borrow money at virtually zero and just buy back stock without investments, that's exactly what companies are going to do. That's what they're doing, and that's why this is, in some ways, a very hollow recovery. So, Dagan, to your point, I am somewhat worried, but at the same token, I don't think it changes until inflation becomes a problem. If inflation stays low and interest rates can stay low, stocks can grow. Stocks can, and I think what's going to happen, what is happening, is that the valuations of the very best companies, the strongest companies, are going to go. They're not quite at nosebleed levels now. They're high levels now. I have a feeling before this is all over, it's not going to feel that strange to pay 25, 26 times earnings for Coca-Cola.
I would agree. Those earnings are worth more in a negative interest rate environment.
Sure.
That's why you're seeing companies like Clorox trade at 26 times multiple. But they are growing in this environment.
I want to get Louise in here because, you know, Brexit. I like to look at Brexit as it relates to the U.S. election. I mean, you said, you know, you made a great point in terms of the policies coming out of these two candidates as a way to push back on Mark Cuban's ideas that the market tanks if Donald Trump gets in. But, I mean, everybody missed Brexit, Louise, right? Yep. And now look at the UK economy. Exactly. Everybody told us how everything was going to just fall out, you know, and it was so hysterical.
I was involved in the campaign, and I knew that it would not. I remember going on Fox the day afterwards when the markets were panicking and crashing, and I said, buy on the dip. I may not be a financial professional, but I knew perfectly well the markets were going to come right back up, and indeed they did. But part of that is free trade. Britain is now free to conclude its own trade deals. The city, for example, can conclude a trade deal with Singapore. I think Donald Trump really wants to solidify his financial advantage. He needs to get off this pro-Putin, anti-free trade. What is anti-globalism? You know, Republicans are in favor of free trade. He has to be a pro-business president. He's halfway there on the taxes. He's got to get rid of this anti-globalist stuff. You know, Republicans believe in free trade.
Which is why you said trade is one of the more important.
I think, you know, part of this election, this gets into something that's not my bailiwick, but it's social science, but I think that a lot of regular people are questioning what the intellectual elite have been telling them is good for them. And whether that's free trade or open borders, the elites know it. And it's negative interest rates is the latest, I would say, is the latest thing that elites are telling them are going to be good for them. And it's not working out.
Where I come from, they don't call them elites. They have other words for them.
Well, and Hillary Clinton has been the queen of crony capitalism and sending through the foundation as well. So that trickles through the economy.
Real quick while we have you, yesterday Amazon at an all-time high, NASDAQ at an all-time high. Would you buy technology right here, Jason?
I would. I would. We talked about it before. I mean, we talked about the company. Some of those companies don't have dividends. There's a lot of old tech, you know, I would say the Ciscos of the world, the Microsofts of the world, which have remarkably, just given my career, have become yield plays. I mean, I remember when Cisco was trading at 100 times earnings in '99, and the concept of them paying a dividend would be seen as absurd.
Apple's a yield play.
That's right.
Apple's a yield play.
And Microsoft?
So there's, you know, in a world of negative interest rates, those dividends become very important.
The tech sector yields more than the 10-year Treasury.
Thank you so much, Jason. Jason Trenner, a strategist there. Straight ahead.
Well, I think one of the things we're seeing is the tightening of the polls, especially on the four-way. The Fox poll showed Hillary last week with a 6-point lead, but only a 2-point lead, same as we do on the four-way ballot. What's not changing is the favorable, unfavorable ratings of either of these two candidates. We had Hillary at 55%, Trump was at 58%. So the closing is coming in large part from two things. One is that Hillary bleeds more to the other third-party candidates when you go to the four-way ballot. The other is that Trump in recent weeks has gotten back up to an equal support level from Republican voters to where Hillary is with Democratic voters, and that has closed the race.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly has had a better 2 weeks, Dagan, relative to what we saw right after the convention.
And
right.
Go ahead, Ed. And she's been in hiding, essentially, doing nothing but fundraising during the month of August.
Well, I think I wouldn't put too much credit on that. I think it's a combination of fundraising and planning for the debates, which are going to be very important. I think what we saw from Trump in the last 2 weeks is less of the rallies, less of the kind of brash, aggressive Donald Trump, which gives an opportunity for those Republicans to kind of fall in line. One of the things I've been saying for some time is that him leading with his personality, he doesn't need to do that anymore. He's the nominee. Leading with his personality stirs up those negatives. It's like a boxer with a glass jaw leading with his chin. He needs to talk about issues, which he's doing, and the more he talks about issues and connects that with a Republican position on issues, which is stronger than he is on the economy, on jobs, and even foreign affairs, the better he's going to do in the polls.
Let me get to the next poll we want to look at, because heading into the election, your poll also shows the top issues for voters. Walk us through that and what's changed.
Well, you are seeing a little bit less of an emphasis on terrorism than what we saw early in the summer and kind of midsummer. More of an emphasis on the economy, on jobs, on taxes. So again, I think the more he has an opportunity, and one of the things we saw in this survey is that Republicans versus Democrats score higher on those measurements than he does versus Clinton. So I think kind of falling in and falling back on those positions that Republicans have been fighting, quite frankly, for quite some time, the better he'll solidify that Republican vote and be in a position to win in November.
Yeah, we keep seeing, Louise, people feel that Donald Trump is better equipped to create jobs.
I guess so.
Based on polls.
I'm interested that number for the economy is actually quite low, 21%, and I think that's because the economy is doing okay. But what we're just hearing from the pollster here is the more Donald Trump acts like the despised establishment that he's been running against for so long, the better he does in the polls. Less Trump, more GOP. Hillary Clinton was absent for most of August, but she's been absent for the whole campaign because she's allowed Trump to run against himself. If he can just get out of his own way and act like a real Republican, then he has a chance to win.
Go ahead, Ed.
And really what I'm saying is if you look at the survey and you look at Republicans versus Democrats on those issues, it's coming out on the policies rather than leading with his personality. Because those policies, whether he wants to call it anti-establishment, we've been fighting those battles for the last decade or the last 8 years. And that's where the Republicans will gravitate to, who perhaps are negative about or unfavorable about his personality, but could be very positive about his positioning on the issues. So it's not all of a sudden becoming the establishment. It's setting that establishment argument aside and focusing on the issues, which is what we're seeing him do a little bit more. We saw him do it on immigration. We can see him do it on taxes, on the economy, and on jobs, where, quite frankly, the Republican Party has a stronger standing with a broader electorate.
Now, the latest on the increase in drug prices. After a dramatic price increase for the life-saving drug EpiPen, New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman announced that the pharmaceutical company Mylan is under an antitrust investigation in New York. Joining us right now is a member of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee and Florida Congressman Ron DeSantis. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
What is this investigation trying to accomplish?
Well, I think the New York State is involving antitrust, and we'll just have to see how that shakes out. I think here in the Congress, what we found, and this isn't the first example of a company doing this, is they're really capitalizing on regulatory monopolies that are created by the federal bureaucracy. There's nothing special about the drug that the EpiPen administers. It's been around for over 100 years, but any competitor who wants to compete with the EpiPen runs into all these regulatory roadblocks. And so it's effectively a government-conferred monopoly, which will, just following the basic laws of economics, lead to higher prices. So we need to look at what the government's doing to create the environment that's leading to some of these instances.
Well, Congressman, but will you looking at it and talking about it actually do anything about it? It comes down to the FDA essentially not approving generic competitors with speed. You had the problem with Sanofi because there were a few instances of injections that went wrong. There was a recall there. Teva tried to introduce a generic competitor. That's really the issue, is the Food and Drug Administration.
I agree 100%. And we remember when Martin Shkreli did the increase for Daraprim, we brought in the FDA and they said, look, we don't really follow the prices. That's not our mandate. And while that's true, they are not involved in price controls. They have to understand how their lack of action is fueling these price increases. And so I think part of it is the FDA has dropped the ball. But yes, I think there is some room for Congress to enact some legislative reforms so that we can streamline this process and make sure that these drugs are getting to market in a cost-effective way.
Congressman, what actual legislative reforms are you talking about to address this issue? Because we saw what Mylan did is they hired a cadre of lawyers and lobbyists to squash the competition and to overburden the FDA. So what can Congress actually do to prevent that from happening? So it's not only the price increases, you have special interests protecting themselves.
Oh, without question, and unfortunately, that's just the mother's milk of how modern Washington operates. And, you know, I'd like to break that up across the board, not just in this instance, but it will be tough to enact reforms because of what you're saying, because the companies that have access to the people who can lobby to prevent these types of changes, they're really in the driver's seat. It's always easier to stop a legislative reform than to actually enact it. So I think all of those things will be roadblocks. But look, there are certain common sense things that you can do in terms of the speed in which these things have to be dealt with and removing other roadblocks that people who are well-meaning trying to bring good products to market are just getting beat down by the bureaucracy.
Well, there are a lot of frightened people out there right now who depend on these EpiPens, and this is an absolutely huge increase. And when I hear legislative reform, it sounds great. It also sounds like it's going to take forever. What can you do right now to ease this situation? And can you put a rocket up the behind of the FDA, basically, and tell them that change is going to come sooner than later if they don't pull their ideas out? You say pricing isn't a part of their remit, but when pricing hurts sick people as it's doing in this way, then it has a direct knocking-on effect on health, and I would argue that it has to be a part of their remit. People are terrified about the price of this EpiPen going up.
Real quick, Congressman.
Well, I would just say that we don't have a hearing scheduled, but I think we will bring the FDA again in front of the Congress and identify some of these shortfalls. And when you get some sunlight on it, that tends to be a good motivator for them to start to change their ways.
Congressman, let me switch gears for a minute, because the FBI says that Hillary Clinton's staff destroyed her mobile device with hammers. I mean, literally with a hammer. Donald Trump obviously responded. Listen to this. I want to get your reaction to see if you're going to do anything about it.
It's such a long answer to that question. It could go on for days. 13 phones, iPhones, whatever they were, and just banging the heck out of them. How about the acid wash of the emails that didn't mean anything? How about the 33,000 missing emails that were acid washed? Okay, acid washed. And Rudy was telling me nobody does it because it's such an expensive process.
So, Congressman, we know this from the FBI notes that were released, obviously, on Friday night after 4:30 in the afternoon on Labor Day weekend, which is ridiculous in and of itself. But we got the FBI notes. We know that Hillary's staff actually literally used a hammer to destroy at least 2 of 13 devices she used during a 4-year period. And she used that bleach to destroy the emails. Is that obstruction of justice? Are you going to have an investigation about this?
We are going to investigate all the fallout from how these devices were handled, how the emails were erased. And I would just say, Maria, it's interesting because Director Comey rested his recommendation not to prosecute on the lack of intent. But I would ask, what intent is being shown when you're taking a hammer to BlackBerries and you're going to these extraordinary lengths to use BleachBit to delete these emails? If there was really nothing incriminating there, then why would you go through such trouble? Not to hide yoga lessons, I don't think.
Right. And yesterday, Judge Napolitano told us that Hillary's lawyers told the FBI she's not going to speak to you at all if the interview is recorded, so you better not record it. And the FBI, in fact, went against protocol and did not record the interview. How is that possible, Congressman? Are you going to do anything about that? I mean, can you do anything about this stuff?
We're going to conduct oversight. We have Comey coming to the Congress tomorrow or next week in front of the Judiciary Committee. But I would also say, not only did they not record it, they let Cheryl Mills, who was her chief of staff at the State Department, sit in the interview. She was a potential target of the investigation as well. They would never do that for the run-of-the-mill criminal suspect. So there is so much about this that just doesn't follow how the FBI would normally do business.
So Congress is going to investigate this then, and you've got Jim Comey speaking to you next week, you said.
We are, and then on Monday, on the Oversight Committee, we're doing a hearing about the email issue, the deleted emails, and trying to get to the bottom from the technical side. We need to talk to some of the tech geeks about how all this stuff came to pass.
Congressman, thank you. We'll see you soon, sir. Thanks. We'll be watching. Ron DeSantis there.